God to kind of help shape humans, kind of test them, kind of forge them into what you're becoming.
Question.
Yeah, please.
Oh, does this mean that like God uses evil to kind of teach people lessons, or to use it kind of in a good way?
It can. And my next question maybe kind of goes on to that. I don't want to give you examples. What things have you heard people say to get past this issue? A lot of times you hear them a lot at, say, a funeral. A lot of times you hear them when when a tsunami hits, say, Japan. How do people talk about these things involve God about it?
Sometimes people try and put like a positive spin on things and say like if someone's died, they say, well, now they can enjoy their life with God, or if a disaster happens, then it's a chance for the community to come together and work to solve it or something.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely, I've heard that one. Anybody else heard that one? How many aren't playing? Okay, now we're playing. Okay. Any other that you've heard? I'll bet, yeah.
When something bad happens, sometimes people will try to find like the good out of it.
Mm-hmm.
Like for example, like a divorce. People like when the divorce really bad, but maybe there's a reason like the father could have been like really bad to the kids, and as a divorce, he can't do that to anyone. Like the kids, like have a better life.
Yeah.
Like a good side out of that.
Yeah. You'll notice there's a human thing. We just don't like to deal with evil much, so we try and just call it good as most we can, right? That happens quite often.
We all heard everything happens for a reason.
That was on my list.
Is it?
Actually, so was both of yours, but yeah, that's on my list too. Have you heard that one before? It's okay. Everything happens for a reason. Have anybody ever heard, you kind of, I think you mentioned this, it's all part of God's plan. Maybe, it's for your own good. Everything will, and then, again, I can't remember which commenter brought this up. Everything will be sorted out in the next life. Now, one thing I want you to notice with all of these, it's not that these is absolutely correct. In fact, as you go through them, I think you find that each of them, and our brains don't like this very much. We kind of like things to be this and this. Each one of those, you might say, has some pros and some cons to it. So you kind of have to ask yourself, okay, that works in these ways, but that could lead to this. So, for an example, we might say, well, everything will be like put right in the next life. But what might a weakness be in that view? There's no doubt it might be comforting to somebody, and that's great. But it might not work for everybody else. What might a downside of that view be? Yeah.
Because they can't see them anymore,
yeah. Right. Or if you have this idea that you have to wait till the next life for everything to be right, then you're kind of skirting around the issue right here and now, right? It's kind of an easy way to remove yourself from having to do stuff right here and now. Now, like I say, it's not to say that doesn't bring people comfort, and that's one of the things I think is really important when we're talking about this question. This is a super personal kind of thing, isn't it? Don't every one of us in this room make meaning of this in some way, by ourselves preferably, right? Because have you ever seen this happen or heard someone tell this happening where, something along the lines of, somebody just lost their husband maybe, and people who are good intention, no doubt, but they come up and start explaining why this happened to them. They start giving them their kind of take on why bad things happen. Yeah, you don't want to do that. Okay, because a lot of times that's tough for people to hear right in the moment. And I think it's important to step back and say, when these bad things happen, it's really important to respect everybody's kind of individual choice to go and kind of see what makes sense for them and realize that our brains think differently. What works for me might not work for somebody else. Maybe it does. Maybe in a context where it's more appropriate, you're talking about these things and you realize, well, there's a couple of things I'm just going to kind of take and incorporate into my view. And other stuff, I don't know so much, but, you could leave that, I suppose. Just to realize that, the Bible and theology and studying in a university and all that's really good. But I think it's important that we always realize that, what are the two things you're never supposed to bring up? Politics and religion, right? you always make sure that, we're talking about religion, so it is not just something we're studying, it's something fairly personal to people. We can be respectful of that.
But do you have a question?
Oh,
Sorry, I
I was
don't
gonna
see it.
say,
For the, like, why that's a difficult subject was the idea of not going to God. The idea, because, like, I just remember you saying that, like,
Sorry, say one more time.
oh, it was just something from,
It's okay.
you were saying, like, why do people skirt around that? And I
Oh,
was
yeah.
gonna say, like, because the idea of not going to heaven.
Right, exactly. Yeah, no, that's a point well taken.
it's really painful.
For sure. Very good point. Because heaven opens up a possibility for you if someone's passed on, doesn't it? Opens up a possibility of seeing somebody again, right? That brings comfort. Okay, well, I introduce all of this because that's what Job's main kind of thing is, that Job's going to try and take on and talk about. Here's how I like to talk about, just to kind of sum up everything in a real nice, easy way. I brought my friend, the triangle, to help us out. And you're going to say, how are you going to explain theodicy with a triangle? Well, it's actually pretty simple. If you think of each one of those points on that triangle as a different concept. So the top one, if we put at the top and we say, God is just. What does it mean to be just?
Right.
Say again?
Like right.
Do the right thing, right? God is just. I mean, this also, means that, God's make sure everything works out as it should. Okay. On the next corner, we're going to put God is all powerful, or another term for that, omnipotent. And we've probably all heard that one at some point, that God's all powerful, right? And on the next corner, we're going to put this. The idea of innocent suffering, namely that it exists at all. Now I want you to think about that triangle there, and any kind of view you can have of kind of dealing with, evil or suffering, and notice something. If you look at that, it's impossible to keep all three parts of that triangle intact. You can't do it. Because if God's all-powerful, God's just, well then, there wouldn't be such a thing as innocent suffering, because God would step in and, also if God's just, then people who suffered, they would deserve it, right? All right, we might not like that idea because we look around, we see some innocent suffering and say, yeah, I think that goes on. So what do? We say, well, God's not just. Sometimes he's just mean. Sometimes he just lets things happen. Okay? Or maybe we'll go over to this other one and say, well, okay, if God always does what's right, and I can see the innocent suffering goes on, well, maybe God just can't do anything about this evil that's going on. It's kind of one of those things you're like, I wish you wouldn't have told me that, thanks, right? Because you're sitting in this place where you're like, well, I kind of want to keep all of them, right? Don't we? But you see how logically speaking, they really can't be held together, because you can take any two, but that'll just cancel out that third one. So I want us all to think about this triangle. We'll call it the theodicy triangle. Okay? As we talk about Job, and we'll come back to it, because I want to take some of the characters in the story of Job and ask the question: which corners, which point of the triangle are they lopping off in the way that they think of things? Okay. All right. So just by way of some stuff about Job, and like I said, there were so many good questions you guys had, and so many, in fact, that I decided for the end just to kind of walk through some of those, because some of them will get answered for sure, and others were kind of very specific on a particular passage that wasn't something I was going to focus on, but they were worth discussing, because I'll tell you, from several of you, I learned things. I learned new ways to view the text. It was great. It was great. But the outline, so first thing, let's talk about Job. He's from this place, Uz. Okay? To be honest with you, archaeologists don't actually know if Uz ever actually existed. We're not sure. If it did exist, It's down in an area called Edom, which is down south of the Dead Sea. Does anybody happen to have been over to Israel before, Palestine? It's an interesting, if you've been to the Dead Sea, wow, if you think Texas is hot, take a trip there. However, here's, I was throwing this, here's one, you'll notice I do this. I don't know, it's just kind of fun. One interesting thing about the Dead Sea, if you go there ever, really, really cool experience. How many the Dead Sea actually sits 800 feet below sea level? It's really weird. So you're sitting up in Jerusalem, you're 1,200 feet above sea level, you get on, in my case, a bus, and you travel down, you're going towards Jericho, and you kind of veer off to the Dead Sea, but you're dropping altitude so fast in such a little amount of road that your ears pop like you're on an airplane. It's kind of weird. Then you pass this monument to the right of the road that says you are now at sea level, but you look around everywhere, it's just desert. And you're like, wait, what? Okay, and so you keep dropping. Well, it's interesting. It's so far below sea level, and one of the things you do at the Dead Sea, you got to do this if you ever get a chance, is you walk down to the edge of the sea, and the sea, nothing. They call it the Dead Sea for a reason. Not much lives there. A few organisms that like salt, I suppose. But you go down to the edge, and as you reach underneath the banks of it, you pull up this kind of clay, muddy-looking stuff. It's very, very dark, very black. Then you take that stuff all over your body. This is the day of the spa. Okay? In fact, a lot of people think some of the kind of ideas of spas came from this place. So you take this and you rub it all over, and then you sit in the sun for about 2-3 hours, whatever. And you might be thinking, wait, because it's like 110 outside, and that could get a lot. But you sit there and let it bake onto your skin, and because the water in the Dead Sea has so many salts and minerals and things, super healthy for your skin. So you go after you're done, you go and wash it off in the Dead Sea, and your skin's so shiny, and your calluses are nice